Welcome back, everybody. I hope this video finds everybody healthy. There's been a spike in COVID cases, and I hope nobody is sick and their families are also healthy. So as you can well see, I've got my two GI-275's installed. They've been in the airplane for about 3 months. They work absolutely great, better than I even expected. There's been a few glitches during the installation that have been worked out, and everything now works perfectly fine. And the top unit is an ADI AHRS Autopilot unit, which works as primary ADI, and attitude display indicator is what that stands for. The bottom unit is an ADI AHRS, which works as a standby ADI as well as an MFD. And with the MFD, you can display multitude of pages, CDI, HSI map, traffic, weather map, and so on. And it's very useful to be able to go through all those screens. Today I want to focus on basically how these two units interact with my Autopilot. That was the whole reason for getting the 275, because I did not want to get rid of my Autopilot. It was working fine, and there was no reason to spend extra money to install the Garmin Autopilot, which is absolutely great. I would have loved to do that, but there's no need. It's working fine. The G5 units do not work with any Autopilot except for Garmin Autopilots. The GI-275's do work with legacy Autopilots. And specifically, I want to address GPS steering mode, which I did not have before. I have flown GPS steering before. I owned a Mooney Bravo with a G1000. I owned it with a partner, and it had an STEC 55X, which had native GPS steering in it. My KFC 150 does not have GPS steering as a native mode, and the top unit, the GI-275 Autopilot, will provide it in emulated mode. To be able to use GPS steering, I have to put the Autopilot in heading mode. And the Autopilot doesn't care whether it's getting the information as GPS steering or from the heading bug. The 530 sends a bunch of information to the top GI-275. It will calculate GPS steering. Basically, it anticipates what the airplane should do to be able to go from the center of the current track to the center of the next track in the flight plan. And that's even more important when you got, significant angle turns, so 45, 90-degree turns, or even more than that. Whereas in NAV mode, the Autopilot is reactive to changes in the CDI. And so when the CDI gets deflected, it will react to correct back on course. It doesn't take into consideration winds, ground speed, or anything else. To be able to show you the difference between NAV mode and GPS steering mode emulated from the 275, I've designed a flight plan whereby I fly two triangular courses next to each other. The top one will be flown in NAV mode, and the bottom one in emulated GPS steering mode from the 275 and the Autopilot in heading mode. I will also have a pretty strong crosswind from the south, about 20 knots at 3,000 feet, and that should stress out the Autopilot some, and we should be able to break out the differences in both modes and what the flight path actually was. I'll be coming in from the west towards Opie in NAV mode, continue NAV mode for the top triangle, counterclockwise, back to Orejo. When I get close to Orejo, I will engage emulated GPS steering mode in the 275 and turn the Autopilot into heading mode and fly the bottom triangle clockwise back towards Orejo. After that, I'm just going to go to Fernandina. There, I plan to do an approach, just practice approach, and I'll show you how GPS steering is going to be useful for the missed approach part of the approach, as well as the initial part of the approach where you get the T-legs, and how it actually flies those really well. You have to remember that once you're on the final approach course, to engage approach, because unless you do that on GPS steering, you will not get any glide slope tracking by the Autopilot. It only picks up the glide slope when it's in approach mode, so it only goes in vertical mode and approach mode, if there is any for the approach. So let's get this going, get up in the air, and just record some of these deviations, and I'll show you what they are in flight, and then finally on the approach we'll see what it does on the missed approach. See you in flight. All right, engine's up and running. I got the units up and going. How do I get to GPS steering? And that's the only part that's kind of inconvenient in these units. You have to open up a menu. To open up a menu, you can slide up or long press the small button. So you have to go to options. You have to go to nav option. You have to go to heading options. And finally here, you either set the autopilot reference as a heading bug or GPS steering. When you go to GPS steering, you'll notice that the heading bug changed from solid to hollow. And if you were to change, suppose I put the heading bug up, heading mode on the autopilot, if I change it, nothing happens. It's not going to pay attention to anything. It's going to take the GPS steering mode from the 530, tell me which way to turn to get to the next waypoint. That's what it's doing. That's what it's telling me. If I go to go back to heading bug, I have to go through the whole sequence again. Say this time I'm just going to long press options, press nav option, scroll to the right, heading option, autopilot reference, heading bug, and now it's centered, or it will respond to the heading bug. So en route, this can be a big of an issue because you're sitting there and the controller told you to turn heading such and such. If you're en route and you're in GPS steering mode, you'd have to get rid of GPS steering, or I found a better way, just disable heading mode on the autopilot, press heading and disables it. Press control wheel steering, get yourself onto the heading that you want to be, release control steering, then you'll be in a level, wings level mode, and you can adjust it if you need to with control wheel steering and get back onto whatever heading you want to be. And you just turn the heading just to remind you what heading the heading bug to that particular heading they gave you. Although it's hollow, the autopilot would not respond if it's in heading mode, and that's what you would do. That's the best way to do it. I found fastest and more expedient. So that allows you to fly GPS steering mode all along the way. We'll show that in flight as well. All right, we're flying the first triangle in nav mode. And as you can see, it's trying to find, staying on course with a southerly wind here. You can see the wind vector on the top, 275. You can pick various fields to put in that one single field, various data to put in that single field. And true airspeed is a nice one, ground speed, wind, and or then outside air temperature. For this exercise, I picked winds. And you can see the plane wobbling back and forth to stay on course. All right, telling us to turn. You can see the magenta line here on the 530. And if I zoom in, you can see the magenta here on the iPad. Now it auto slews, and it does start to turn there, but we're going to see an overshoot. We'll see how this compares to flying it with GPS steering mode. Well, it's an undershoot from what I can see. See what it does in a sharp turn up, further up there, up north. Coming up, left, 244, 3 seconds. And automatically turns the course indicator to 244 degrees. You can see it down here. And I actually get a standard rate turn.
That's the little icons up there, little airplanes up there is a standard rate turn for the current true airspeed. So it's been undershooting both turns. We got one final turn to come to. Down at the left. And then we'll go to GPS steering mode. All right, left. I'm going to switch this to track up. All right, a turn. This is a sharp turn. Let's see what it does. Once we're outbound Opie towards Orejo, then I'll switch to GPS steering. So let me switch to GPS steering mode. Options, nav options, heading options, GPS steering. You notice the bug turned hollow, and it's going to go find and intercept that course. I got to put it in heading mode. Let's not forget to do that.
Pickup 9 Whiskey Zulu, departure from the
All right.
pilot's own wrist, south departure approved.
Let's see how well it does this. Turning right. Should end up right on course. Center of course. Slight undershoot again, but less than in nav mode. And getting right on track. So that was pretty good. We'll see what happens at this next turn coming up now. Nice and steady, center track. Not much wobbling here. It's not a standard rate turn. It's not turning as much as the NAV did. NAV did a standard rate turn, and this is doing less. It's correcting for the wind. And it's following its magenta line there. All right, if I turn the map page and get my resolution down here, you'll see where the CDI is, what the magenta line is, where it's going to end up on course. Right on to center track. If I go to the HSI page, I'm right on track. CDI is centered. So that is much better tracking than the nav mode did, as we can see. So we're coming up to another magenta line here. Right there. That's the one that's coming from the 530. And I should follow it right on the money. My iPad Garmin app doesn't have it just exactly, but here you can see it. The wind's coming from the left. We're being pushed behind us. And it's probably going to have to turn a little bit faster. And so it'll be now behind us and to our right eventually. So sharper angle of bank. Staying on up to center track. Just about centered. It knows they're going to be being pushed to the left. That's correcting. Getting back on course. And if we go to the HSI page, slightly right of course. I had said left, that was incorrect. Slightly right of course and correcting. So obviously GPS steering, roll steering mode gets the predictive information for the turns from the 530 instead of just reacting to the CDI. Much better.
As you can see, this is the flight path actually taken by the aircraft with the autopilot and NAV mode in the top triangle and the GPS steering mode in the bottom triangle. In the NAV mode, obviously, the wind was pushing the airplane all over the place, and just correcting for CDI deflections was not enough to really keep it on track. This is most obvious in the lower left corner of the top triangle, where the wind was pushing it significantly to the north. And although it turned when the 530 told it to turn, it just did not follow the magenta line and did not get back on the actual course it was supposed to fly. In GPS steering mode, the wind didn't bother the autopilot in any way whatsoever because the 530 was giving it the heading to take to just follow that little magenta line that it had calculated necessary to make the turns accurately and get back on course. Big, huge difference between nav mode and GPS steering mode on the autopilot. It's nice to have.
As I said, let's say that ATC, you're en route with them, you're IFR, and you're going to your next waypoint, tracking along nicely, and they tell you, turn heading, whatever, for traffic or weather or whatever reason. And so you have to do that. Well, in GPS steering mode, if you turn to heading bug, sorry, I got to put it back on the heading bug. Putting on heading bug, nothing changes. It just keeps on trucking along according to the track information that's 530 is telling to keep, the heading is supposed to keep on track. So what I found best to do, okay, turn right heading to 110. I'm going to turn to 110 here. It doesn't show me what it is, but I can sort of see what it is. 100 here. So I would get rid of heading mode, put control wheel steering, turn, maintain altitude, because as soon as I press control wheel steering, every mode gets disabled. Center it on that new heading. That's why I put the heading bug there. Release control wheel steering. It will then go back to altitude and wings level. I don't have any lateral mode engaged, none whatsoever. So it's holding altitude. It's holding this particular heading because it's holding wings level. But the guy told me heading whatever, doesn't matter what winds are, that's the heading he wants me on. So we turn again, or now he says get back on course. I can either be direct to the next waypoint, or he says get back on course. Now does that mean turn left and go intercept my desired track, and then no matter how much of a turn I have to make to get back then and go right, or what? So let's say I just engage heading mode now. It's going to go back to GPS steering. It's going to take a left. So I just press heading. There we go. Goes left. gonna go left more than needed to go direct to the next waypoint because it wants to intercept the CDI, the track. It's gonna go find it, center on it, and then keep it centered. If I had been going away from that CDI in nav mode or in heading mode and pressed, or in just level wings mode, press nav, it will be flashing because I'm going away from it. It's expecting me to turn to a heading that will intercept that particular course or track. So this GPS steering does it for you automatically, which is really nice. I've been basically cleared for practice RNAV 13 approach. I'm sure I'll be landing on 09. The minimums for circling are 480, so I'm going to set that right now. So press menu, options, and press minimums. Get the bug, altitude, 480. Enter. Back. I'm going to get an audible.
Papa Foxtrot, turn left direct Jeja and contact Jack's approach on 124.9er.
I'm GPS steering mode, as you can tell. Once I turn inbound on the final approach course, I have to turn it on approach mode so I'll have vertical guidance. Now you notice that the missed approach has climb to 500 on a runway heading, straight out, and then turn left up to 3,000 to go to Akapu.
And 5 Charlie Papa, you can cancel the altitude restriction.
5 Charlie Papa, canceling altitude restriction. Thank you, sir. So let's go down to 3,000. 3,000, get rid of this. And control wheel steering. Get my pitch right. I keep on centering the bug just in case. So I'm going to turn off the autopilot once I get to those minimums. Once I cross the missed approach point, runway 13, I will get an audible. I'll get suspend will come up on the autopilot, on the 530, I'm sorry. And if I were to cancel suspend, that is press the button for it, which is the OBS button, then immediately it will go to GPS steering and have me turn left up to 3,000. That would be not the right thing to do because it wants me to go runway heading up to 500 and then turn. So, in all these approaches that you have climb to a certain altitude on straight out, you don't want to press suspend until you've gotten to that altitude. And after that, you do, and you'll get guidance for your next waypoints and the missed approach from the GPS. So I'm going to show you how that works. All right, splashing, turn, wind's coming from behind me. Should anticipate the turn pretty well. So it's turning once on course, and I'm going to go down to 2,000. 2,000. Release altitude, hold. Gonna turn. Pitch down. Speed brakes. You saw the glide slope come up, but I have to put the autopilot in approach mode now. And it's gonna track. All right, I'm on approach mode. That's what I want. Fernandina Beach traffic, 2495 Charlie Papa 8 northwest. Practice RNAV 13 approach. We'll circle to land on 09 Fernandina, full stop. Two 200 feet. Coming rich. I want to have my configuration all set by the time I get to final approach fix. 2080. Press altitude. Put this to 3,000, which will be my hold altitude at a capo. Minimums are set. Altitude, approach mode. Speed brakes are out. Mixture's coming rich. Slowing down. Pass under full tank. Gear. As I intercept glide slope, gear is down and long. Okay, we're getting to 480. So
Minimums.
cancel this. Speed brakes coming in. Low power. Keep 480. Putting my strobe lights on. All right. Gear's still down. Now I put the gear up. Flaps up. Add more power. All right, suspend. Came in. I'm at 500 feet. So now if I press suspend and I put heading bug on, it'll guide me to climb up. You can see the flight director. If I were to put the autopilot on, let me do that. It's going to climb at the current pitch. Fernandina Beach traffic, 2495 Charlie Papa is turning left crosswind 09 Fernandina, full stop. So, that's a nice thing about keeping it in GPS steering mode for a missed approach. We'll fly it for you. And gonna disconnect the autopilot. And put my gear down and get to land. Aim to be at 75 on final.
Minimums.
Again. Fernandina Beach traffic, 2495 Charlie Papa's turning final. 09 Fernandina, full stop. Like wind's going to be coming from the right a little bit. Straightening it out. 80. All right, full rich. Dumps.
Fernandina traffic, November 739 Echo, taxiing onto runway 9, Fernandina Beach.
Fernandina Beach traffic, Mooney 495 Charlie Papa, clear 09. All All right. How was that?